amongst us today. And also amongst us is Dr. David Nabarro, the recipient of the World Food Prize 2018, just given this month. Lots of friends here know us, Bharat, Krishak, Samaj, but to place it on record, it's a farmers' organization which does not have strong political convictions. Though we have very strong policy preferences. We are not aligned to any political party, but like all people, we too have a heavy ideological endowment from the environment and the circumstances we live in the villages. Bharat Krishak Samaj agrees on three things. First is, when we know what is happening is wrong. Second is, people should know about it. And third is, we will speak about it. We will not keep quiet about it. There is a crisis of confidence amongst the farmers in the nation, not only in India, but I think so there's a crisis of confidence among farmers across the world, across continents. And the infinite optimism that farmers have is now tempered with fear. But as a farmers' organization, in words of Frodo in Lord of the Rings, he says there's some good things in the world that are worth fighting for. And I think it's worth fighting for farmers' prosperity. There are different ways to get to our objectives, and we may have disagreements on how we want to get there, but we all agree on that part. It's equally true that discussions on agriculture in India have remained focused on the farm, while most farm issues stem out from out-of-farm activities and policies not made on the farm, obviously. Therefore, to change the narrative, we are trying to change the narrative and bring it in the food systems dialogue, because discussing agriculture is not going to solve problems of the farmers or of agriculture or farms. David Nabarro, Dr. David Nabarro is here. He's not only fascinating, inspiring, a magical curator and organizer, but he has also received the World Food Prize together with Mr. Lawrence Hadd, Executive Director of the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition this year. He also heads a Swiss-based startup social enterprise, 4SD. He's a medical doctor, international civil servant and teacher. He has held many senior positions in the World Health Organization and United Nations system. He's focused on transforming food and health systems so that they work for the people and for the planet. He also holds a part-time position as a professor of global health at the Imperial College in London. I invite Dr. David Nabarro to explain the food systems dialogue to us in detail. Please give Dr. Nabarro a warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you. First of all, just what an honor it is to be here with all of you in New Delhi today. Just to say that this subcontinent is where I have learnt most of what I have in my head and in my heart about how people live and how life works. I spent 5 years working in the region when I was younger, in Nepal, in West Bengal, in Orissa, and in Gujarat. And I hope that by returning here today and meeting with you all, I will be able to build on the impressions and understanding that I gained when I was in the region as a young medical officer and development professional. And so in a way, as I begin, I would like to acknowledge and thank the people and officials, civil society activists and scientists from this country and the region for everything that I've learned. The World Food Prize this year came in my direction, and also, as Ajay just said, to Lawrence Haddad. Why? It was because the World Food Prize jury decided that they wanted to highlight the issue of human nutrition, and they wanted to try to show the importance of the links between food systems and human nutrition, and the absolute challenge that is faced all over the world in trying to make sure that food systems really do contribute to the well-being of people. And I think all of you know, but I'm just going to repeat it, that in our world today, there are nearly 1 billion people who are still hungry and food insecure. And the number is rising again after having been on the decline for about 10 years. And the fundamental cause of this is ongoing wars, particularly in Africa, which are just leading to, unfortunately, still large numbers of people, particularly children and women, being undernourished and food insecure. But we have another problem, which you'll all be aware of, and that is that at least 1 billion people, and by some estimates it's approaching 2, who are experiencing health challenges because they're just not eating diets that are good for their well-being. And if we look at the current situation globally, 25% of death rates are resulting from dietary causes, but we're also seeing a worldwide epidemic of type 2 diabetes and increasing levels of cardiovascular disease. And those two challenges are unfortunately directly related to what people are eating. So most commentators inside the health sector are starting to ask what's wrong with food systems that they are providing food for people that seems to be associated with high levels of illness, and what can be done to help food systems to become more healthy and nutritious. But on the other hand, we have agricultural communities say there's a crisis in farming, as Ajay has just said, with increasing numbers of farmers finding that their livelihoods are unsustainable and that they are in situations of really severe distress. And as I heard today, with unfortunately a really large number of farmers actually taking their own lives because the situation for them is so bad. And then agriculture is facing a third challenge, which is that the relationship between farming and the environment doesn't always seem to be in equilibrium. And so, as you're all experiencing in India, there are places where there's extreme shortage of water, with aquifers emptying or becoming damaged by presence of heavy metals. And we've also got the situation of topsoil being undermined and forestation being reduced. So there are some big environmental challenges. And then the fourth concern is that agriculture and land use changes are associated with about 35% of greenhouse gas emissions at this time. Taken together, as I don't need to really remind you all, there is a time now where the whole area of agriculture and food systems does need quite radical rethinking. Where will this go over the next 10 years? And that's why a group of organizations, each of which is international in approach, they are the World Economic Forum, the World Business Council on Sustainable Development, EAT, and the Food and Land Use Coalition, came together and decided that they would like to encourage dialogue in as many venues as possible to start asking tough questions about the future of agriculture and food. The dialogues have been taking place internationally, Stockholm, New York. They're going to take place in Poland, in Katowice, at the time of the COP, the Climate Convention of the Parties, that's coming up shortly. They're going to take place in Bangkok at a meeting organised by the International Food Policy Research Institute and FAO. They're also taking place regionally in Europe, in Africa, and will be increasingly, I think, in parts of Southeast Asia. And here in India today, we're having the first in the series of these food systems dialogues, organised by Ajay and the team in Bharat, Krishak, Samaj. And I hope that we will, through these discussions, both through the lecture format that we're having now and round-table discussions that we anticipate will take place later this afternoon and tomorrow. We will give an opportunity to everybody to debate in as open a way as possible on the options ahead for the future of agriculture and food. Now, one of the issues in this area has been that quite often the differences of opinion are strong, and there are groups who find it very hard to talk together because their positions are so divergent. And so what we're encouraging through the dialogues is safe spaces where people who have very divergent issues can come together and talk without fear that they will be quoted outside. So in the dialogues, we've tried to create one underlying principle, which is that everybody gets a chance to speak, and that whatever they say during the dialogue is not then taken outside and put into social media or into any other venue that can lead to any trouble for those people. And I would like to suggest that, in keeping with the traditions of your organisation, that we do that kind of approach and that we have open dialogue and an opportunity for sharing. Now, last point, I'm an outsider. I'm not of India. I'm somebody who has learnt a lot from this country, and I have no right to do anything other than be with you, learn with you, and understand with you, and hopefully take your experiences and share them with people elsewhere. But I'm super aware that I have no authority here, and I'm just very grateful to you for letting me be with you to hear what you're doing, and I shall be commentating from time to time during these 2 days, but merely as a catalyst and an observer, absolutely understanding that the issues we're going to be discussing are about this country and her people. Thank you very much indeed for the chance to be with you. I shall be interacting at intervals during the 2 days.
Thank you so much. Now we will move on to session 1. Nand Kumarji, I think so. I'll just give the floor to you. And Abhijit Sen Saab, Dr. Ashok Gulati ji. And I will not, वो कहते हैं ना कि गुस्ताखी नहीं करेंगे इंट्रोड्यूस करने के लिए, because everybody knows whoever's on the stage. Thank you so much for being here with us.
On my behalf also, I welcome all of you to this dialogue. We have two of India's most eminent agriculture economists in this part of the session. Dr. Abhijit Sen, who is member of the erstwhile Planning Commission. Dr. Ashok Gulati, who worked long time with IFPRI. And also, I think both of them were chairman of the CACP, the Commission on Costs and Prices for Agriculture. And Ashok, of course, is now chair professor in ICRIER. Before I request them to speak on their chosen topics, I thought I'll just say a few words about this dialogue in the context of India.
Thank you.
The Indian development of agriculture actually started from a sense of food insecurity. We were food insecure when we were born as a country, and we tide over that phase and became a net rice and wheat exporter over a period of time, thanks to science, thanks to investments, thanks to our farmers. But today, the challenge, and Ashok has written about it, how the Indian consumer has moved away from pure cereal-led consumption to a much larger and a wider thali, which has many more things in it. So I think the first challenge probably that we need to see in agriculture in the next 10 years is to shift from feeding people to nurturing people. While saying that, we are aware of the challenge of sustainability, both from an environmental perspective, because we have severely water-stressed areas, we have erratic rainfall, we have floods, we have everything else, but also the sustainability of farming as a profession. If the farmers are not prosperous and they don't find farming sustainable, I don't know where we can take agriculture to. So fundamentally, a question arises whether we can continue to have high input agriculture and also high input consumption and related high wastages in the system, or should we need to address some of these issues in the dialogue? Therefore, do we look at better science and better technology, or do we fall back part-time on time-tested practices, local innovations, and should we, I'm sure in the next session we will question this, should we redesign our entire R&D apparatus? From a consumption perspective, if proteins are going to be added more to our diet, then what do? Can we afford to go the Western way, or should we find better solutions to find the necessary proteins for our people? Because if you're going to spend 5,000 liters of water for 1 kilo of rice, and if you're going to probably convert 7 kilo equivalent of grains to produce 1 kilo of meat, then I think probably that's the wrong route to follow. We also heard recently in India a long conversation on that the next stage of agriculture is going to be market-led, which it has been for some time, except for, I think, the heavy policy bias in favor of cereals. But do we then advocate responsible consumption? Would markets put in any premium for sustainable production? Or would markets behave as markets do? These are questions that we will answer in the next 2 or 3 days. But I think one thing is sure, that we need a different vision for the next 10 years, a different strategy for the next 10 years to take agriculture, food and nutrition along for our people. And the only underlying thing that I would like to say is that when we talk about a new vision, when we talk about a new strategy, let's not bring back too many controls on farmers. I think farmers are already over-controlled. I think we should give them much more space and a higher degree of freedom to operate. Probably that's the fundamental underlying principle on which we will probably try to redesign and discuss these food system dialogues. With these brief thoughts, let me invite Dr. Ashok Gulati to speak on connecting farmers to value chain for ensuring farmer prosperity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nand, distinguished participants here. Let me start by congratulating David Nabarro for bringing the entire issue of nutrition into the game of food dialogues and on the global stage. And also to our friend Ajay Jakhar for bringing David here. The topic that I'm given is connecting farmers to value chains for farmers' prosperity. Before I get into the details of that, what is the landscape of our farmers? And what is this food system, how it is operating? I'll spend 2 minutes on that and then get into the nitty-gritty of it. Farmers on one side, they are producers, and over the last 30 years, 40 years, our farms are fragmenting and average holding size is shrinking. Our average holding size, David, is 1.1 hectare today. 87% of our farmers are less than 2 hectares today. So there is a challenge when we try to connect them to value chains, and that food has to be taken all the way from the farm fields to the consumer's plate. How do we make it move with small surpluses? That is the biggest challenge, because at the upper end, the retailing, the processing, all those sectors are consolidating and scaling up in size. So they want large quantities, symmetrical things, whether it is supermarkets or processors or others, whereas our farmers are fragmented and very small. So the challenge of connecting in the value chain two sides, one which is consolidating and scaling up, and the other which is still fragmenting. This is what requires innovation. This is the challenge to the policymakers and academics who are studying the food systems around the world. There was a time when we thought ship-to-mouth story, as Mr. Nanda narrated, that was the 60s phase. But today we have been reasonably able to feed ourselves and have some marginal exports also, net surplus. Although many people will say a lot of malnutrition, a lot of hunger still, and therefore whether calling it a net surplus exporter is a misnomer. Well, whatever it is, at the rate and the technologies and the prices available, we are a net exporter of agriculture to start with. Now, if I have to look at the farmer's prosperity and linking the farmers in this value chain, what do we look at? There is one, you differentiate. Let us say the grain sector, the milk and meat sector, the fruits and vegetable sector, other commercial crops. The value chains of each one are very, very different. I'm reminded of milk because very lately in Maharashtra, many farmers were spilling milk on the streets, on the roads, because they were not getting the right prices. Just 2 weeks back, I was in India's largest tomato market, Mandi in Kolar. Farmer is selling at 5 to 6 rupees a kg. He says my cost is about 7 to 8 rupees a kg. Delhi, that day we checked, we were still getting in retail 30 rupees a kg. The transportation cost and all those, we worked it out. And you look at farmers in fruits and vegetables get on an average 1/3, 1/4, at many places even 1/5. When there is a bumper harvest, prices collapse, 1/5 of what the consumer pays. You look at the milk sector, especially in the cooperatives, Amul claims that 75 to 80% of whatever the consumer is paying, that we ensure goes to the farmer. So there is one value chain which can ensure 75 to 80% of the consumer's rupee going back to the farmer. There are others where it is 1/5 or 1/4 or 1/3. The grains fall somewhere in between. Heavy intervention by the government in wheat and rice has been an historical thing, and roughly about 60 to 70% of what the consumer pays goes to the farmer. Now, if I have to look at this and then ensure what should be the basic principles on which we have to work so that we ensure prosperity of the farmers. And I want to keep two policy instruments or two strategies that different leaders followed. Both came from Gujarat. Next week, David, here, the Prime Minister is going to unveil on this very 31st of October the tallest statue in the world. It's called the Statue of Unity, not Liberty, 182 meters. I'm mentioning that because I want to go back to 1942. During the British period, our milk was not very safe, and somehow the Britishers in Mumbai, they found that our milk is not fit for consumption unless it is treated well. And they relied on one player, namely Paulson, which was a private sector player, that only you can supply milk to the Bombay people here because you can ensure us safe food. So before nutritious food, safe food has to be delivered. He had, in a way, a monopoly power in selling, and then he connected with the Kera farmers in Gujarat, and he had a monopolistic power to buy from them. This was the single player. What was the net result? The net result was farmers said, we are not hardly recovering our costs. They were squeezed on the price front because you had given a monopoly power and a monopolistic power literally to this fellow, Paulson. So the farmers went to their leader, Sardar Patel. That's why I was mentioning about this statue. Why I was mentioning? Because the current Prime Minister, when he started off his election campaign in late 13 and early 14, he asked all the farmers to donate their used farm implements. And from that iron, I will make the statue of this Iron Man of India. It was what a master stroke, connecting with the farmers. And people thought that our good days are coming because the way Sardar Patel led the agitation of the farmers of milk in 1942 to 46, this was ultimately he asked them that you have to make your own cooperative and stop supplying milk to Paulson. For 15 days strike that Paulson did not get the milk and Bombay could not be supplied milk. That was the turning point in the history of milk value chain in this country. That's how the cooperatives came in, and in 1946 finally the first cooperative was registered in Kera. And today, through that value chain, development over a period of time through Operation Floods and then Vajpayee's contribution of delicensing the whole sector, we are today the largest producer of milk, 177 million tons of milk today. US second player is at 96 million tons, way behind, and China is at 45 or so. And this is a value chain which ensures 75 to 80% of the consumer's rupee going to. So what I call it, two things. One, it is competitive in that sense that a larger chunk of the consumer's rupee is able to be passed on to the farmer. But secondly, it is inclusive. In a country like India, you cannot just talk of competitiveness without inclusiveness because of the smallholders. So the real innovation is how to remain competitive with all the innovation to make it inclusive. The smallholders have to be put together. Now, from that angle, when we looked at the third issue, are we also sustainable? The question that you talked about, whether the water table and the water quality, what is happening to that? And the soil degradation that is taking place. You go back to the other, rice was mentioned by Mr. Nand Kumar, 5,000 liters per kilogram of water, and if that is being extracted from regions of Punjab and Haryana where water table is going down by 70 centimeters every year, are they sustainable? Don't we have the technologies to use half water and still give us higher productivity? We do have. But to change the behavior of the farmers, we have to call an end to these policies of free power and free everything. I think that is where the challenge is. And it can be done. So question of comparative value chain, question of inclusive value chain, and question of sustainable value chains, which are sustainable in terms of environment, but also sustainable in terms of financial resources, that they don't become a drag on the exchequer for permanent subsidies on that. Are they a business model which can be self-floating? That is the sustainability on the financial front, and only then it can be scaled up. Now, I want to bring in one more part in this. Competitiveness, inclusiveness, sustainability leading to scalability, but there is one very critical factor in this entire game, which lubricates this entire value chain, and that's the financing. F, from where the financing comes. And this is where the problem is in fruits and vegetables. When we were in Kolar 2 weeks back, what we found, every farmer, literally 90%, 95% of the farmers had borrowed the money from commission agents. So morally, they are obliged to bring back the produce to the commission agents. And those commission agents, for 2 minutes, 3 minutes auction, are charging officially 6 to 8% commission. Unofficially, it goes even to 10%, 12%. For 2 minutes job, 3 minutes job, they can charge such high commissions. Even if you go to Azadpur market or to Mumbai's Vashi market, by law, minimum commission to be charged is 6%. And you look at the auction, the way it is done, it takes you 3 minutes to do that auction and no risk. Somebody else is selling, somebody else is buying in between. So what is needed if you want to bring prosperity by linking farmers to the markets, we need to do certain reforms in the agri-marketing system. Mr. Nand Kumar mentioned that there are too many controls on the farmers. We did 2 years work with OECD. 52nd country added in their agriculture policy evaluation. And what we found from 2000 to 2016, 17 years analysis for different commodities, state-wise and year-wise, that our farmers have been implicitly taxed through restrictive trade policies to the tune of about 14% per annum on an average for 17 years. Especially when the prices go up, immediately we put bans. Onion prices goes up, a ban. Essential Commodities Act, put under that. So they are very restrictive policies. What it reflected was that our entire agriculture policy has been largely pro-consumer and against, implicitly it works against the farmer. So you don't allow. I can understand if there is a dramatic jump of 40% in price and you put some restrictions, but please review those restrictions after 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. We put a restriction and then for 4 years we forget about that. So this is keeping the prices low, which implicitly acts as a tax on the farmer. So that is the price policy we have followed. All these years we'll work towards farm to fork issue, because we were short, whatever farmer will produce will be absorbed. But the next phase that is coming is going to be plate to plow, the demand-driven systems. What the consumer demands, internationally and domestically, which cities, what type of commodity, what type of color, what type of nutrition. Now, linking that and getting to the farmer the information of what the consumer is looking for, I think we have to put the entire thing upside down, and the messages have to go from the big retailers or others. Now, in this country, there is a lot of debate on the big box retailers versus the mom and pop stores. I think it's a little misplaced, because you can dovetail the two together. One could be a hub and the others could be spokes in a system that needs to be upgraded entirely. Massive investments are needed in the infrastructure to build that. The white revolution in this country did not come just by making cooperatives. The collection had to be done, investment had to be done in bulk coolers right there. Then when Carab started producing more, they wanted more markets beyond Mumbai. And they got markets 2,000 kilometers away, even to Calcutta, sending all those milk tankers, specially designed so that the temperature, it does not curdle. It requires a massive investment in logistics, in the basic infrastructure of the markets. I think when I saw the Kolar market, I was already, the market is doing 2.5 times more than what the capacity of the market is. They needed 4 times bigger infrastructure to handle this largest market of tomatoes in India. So who is going to invest that? Is it the government? Is it the private sector? Could there be a public-private partnership with clear rules of the game? I think those are the type of structural reforms and institutional reforms that are needed, from Essential Commodities Act to APMC markets. Why can't the people buy directly from the farmers rather than going through the mandi system? Milk doesn't pass through the mandi system. Why do they give 6%, 8% commission? Why can't we see this relation of credit market with output market, which is interlocked? That's where the real dominance of the commission agents and the extraction takes place. They become rich, farmers remain poor. So I think to get the markets right, we need to do these institutional reforms, we need to do these infrastructure investments, and only then we will be able to get a higher percentage of the consumer's price to the farmers. Last 1 or 2 minutes I want to spend how the government is trying to increase the prosperity of the farmers. Lately they have announced that we will give cost plus pricing, 50% margin over cost A2 plus FL. That is the paid out cost plus family labor. So basically not including the imputed rental on their land or on owned capital. So that's the difference between the two is about 38%, by the way. So 50% on this. Now this is a typical supply side pricing, cost plus. It doesn't look at what the demand side is. So unless the demand side is put into picture, you are going to land up into a problem where farmers would produce, either you have to procure the entire thing and be saddled with all those stocks if they are divorced from the demand currents in the system, because at the end of the round, pricing has to be done by demand and supply forces. And this one-sided approach, to me, it's wrong, number one. Number two, it's going to fail. It is failing right now. The season has started. MSP is 7,000 rupees for moong. Market price is ruling at 4,000 rupees. There are no buyers. So just by announcing higher MSPs is not going to bring prosperity to the farmers, number one. Price policy has to be through getting the markets right. And for that I have elaborated what needs to be done. If that pricing route is still has to be followed or cannot deliver, I think we have to move sooner or later, because our overall policies have been taxing the farmers. I think our feeling and our reading is that country after country has moved towards income policy approach to help the farmers. Last, David, this is for you, that if we have to make some of our food systems more nutritious, the normal process is as the income levels go up, the per capita consumption of wheat and rice will fall, the staples will fall, and the thali will have much more colored and much more nutritious food on it. But that's a very expensive route, and that will take time. It is changing in India, but it is a very gradual change, because there is still a large mass of people who cannot afford meat or even milk at that prices that are needed for the farmers to supply. Can technology, if they gave us the green revolution at that time, the food security to fill up our bellies, can they make nutritious food? Staples. And this is where my last sentence is, that rice and wheat, which are the staples in this country, they have fallen deficient in zinc. And deficiency of zinc, because the soils are deficient in zinc, leads to stunting of children. But lately, both rice and wheat, you have the technology, biotechnology is now working on it, which are released iron rich, zinc rich, and right now I'm the guinea pig of consuming black wheat, blue wheat, and purple wheat, which has 8 times more antioxidants than the normal wheat. So this has already come, and the farmers are producing it, and people are watching. So can we do this so that our staple value chains are not only safe, but also become more nutritious? And if they can get the market for this, and I'm ready to pay for it because I'm getting a much more nutritious food, if we can link them, then it will be a win-win situation, more nutritious food and more money for the farmers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ashok. We are moving into another very interesting, somewhat controversial topic. Agriculture as state subject or on concurrent list to deliver sustainable food systems. Dr. Abhijit Sen.
Well, this topic about whether or not we approach agriculture or food systems as the way it is, which is under the Constitution of India, agriculture proper is a state subject, or do we actually push towards making it something different, and in this context, the concurrent list of the subjects in the Constitution of India, is an old question, but I think it stretches to the food systems idea much more. Now, normally, this discussion in India has taken the following form, which is that there are all sorts of hindrances if it remains a state subject. So why doesn't the center take it over either directly or through the concurrent list? Now, right at the beginning, let me actually put my own personal prejudice on this, or my personal thinking on this, which is, I think agriculture, health, education, all of these, if they work at all well, do so in a more decentralized setting than in a more centralized setting. There are, of course, exceptions to this. So that's my prior. And in a sense, let me then approach this subject, which is from the prior of the opposite side, which is there is something fundamentally wrong with it being a state subject. Now, the Constitution of India on the 7th schedule, which is where you have a whole set of subjects, about 100 plus of them in the central list, around about 60 in the state list, then you've got about 50 or 60 again in the concurrent list. But the interesting thing about this 7th schedule is that the very last item on the central list says that any item which is not in the parts 2 and 3 actually belong to the central list. So that if you can simply change the name of something, you can actually bring it on to the central list. Not only that, unlike similar lists or similar designations of subjects in, say, the Constitution of the United States or that of most other federal states, our concurrent list, which is in between, so states can make law and center can make law, has the property that if the center brings a law, and if at any point that law conflicts with some existing state law, it is the central law which trumps. And that, of course, also means that the bias, if any, in the constitutional way of things is in favor of the center. Both that anything which is missing is center, and anything which you can get into the central list, into the concurrent list, is effectively central. Now, under those circumstances, and I stated my bias at the beginning, we really are beginning with the bias at the favor of the center. Now, where does this matter of states versus the center become most vocal? Now, it's now about 15 or 20 years that I've served in government with breaks in between, of course. The one area in which this is most vocal in the agricultural context is the subject that Ashok was talking about. It has to do with markets. And the demand often comes that agricultural marketing should be in the concurrent list, About other things, there is less said than about this particular thing. And this is partly because of, again, what Ashok referred to, which is that on the top you've got an organized corporate system which wants a system of laws they can understand. They don't want too many players in it, and they want a single law. Then in addition, of course, there are issues like if states have their own taxes, then obviously these taxes can distort the market because of differential taxes. Now, this is where much of the debate, discussion has gone on. And at the end of the day, one can say that after model law, nothing very much has happened. Now, again, that makes me think that somehow I think pushing this subject about the center versus the state in agriculture may be actually looking at the wrong design issue rather than the issues that we should be looking at. Now, for a start, when it comes to agricultural marketing, although this word doesn't appear anywhere, but trade in certain agricultural products, and this includes food grains, it includes oilseeds specifically, and it includes cotton specifically, is a subject under the concurrent list already. What it doesn't include, and this is something, so specifically one item in the concurrent list is trade in food grains, trade in agricultural products, including food grains, this, that, certain things are missed out. So, my question on this is that if despite this, we have not achieved what those who would like it to all to be in the concurrent list to have achieved, there is something else happening. It's not the Constitution. It is, in fact, political will. Every time these model acts have come up, every time there has been discussion within, I don't really know much about the Ministry of Agriculture. There are also a lot of past secretaries of that ministry here. But I know in the Planning Commission, you refer something to the Law Ministry, something comes back, and somehow the Ministry of Agriculture tends to concur with that. And I don't know how much it has been actually pushed, but I think generally there is an idea that let's not stir a hornet's nest too much. Now, I'll actually not take too much time because this is the sort of session which is probably best dealt with as questions to which I might reply. So I'll cut down my talk and allow you to ask me questions if you want. But let me say where I do see, and where the Constitution also did see, merit in there being these things being in the central list. And one big area which the Constitution critically puts in the central list is standards. Whether those standards be in medicine, whether those standards be in education, whether those standards be in weights and measures, whatever they are. So standards is something that properly does belong to a central list. And without standards, I think we can't actually move very far on any of the things. And indeed, I think one of the problems of the market debate is that we all talk about opening up markets, we've had all sorts of e-markets coming in, we had an idea of spot markets to ride on the fact that the futures markets were on the central list, whereas the agricultural markets proper were not. So you ride on the futures markets, on spot markets. But all of them are big jumps, big thoughts, without bothering about a simple fact, which is we've got virtually no grading standards in agricultural commodities. How do you trade miles away on an agriculture commodity without there being a grading standard? And there is nothing. This is something which is entirely in the central list. There is absolutely nothing which prevents you, except the willingness to actually take that route or think about it. And the same goes for health and education, both of which Lawrence, for example, thinks agriculture has very little to do with malnutrition. It's much more to do with the other side. And on those as well, it is the standards. We have a former Secretary of Agriculture who's now the Food Security, what's it called? The FSSI, whatever it is called. You see, the point is that I think there is growing evidence that what we are selling often as healthy food is actually hugely unhealthy. And this is the stuff which comes in packets, looks nice, looks crunchy, claims to have built-in proteins, and you often say, okay, it's not even fried, it's roasted. Kohli eats it. You know, it's supposed to be healthy, but I think there's enough evidence, or certainly there's enough reason to seek evidence on how healthy these things in fact are. So I think really this issue of the center and the states on these matters is something we ought to actually say that it's not center and state so much, it is what subject do we want it to cover. What is equally important is to note that there are certain things, and this is much more important when you go to the sustainability side. Forests used to be in the original state list, but an amendment of the Constitution in the 70s brought the forests into the concurrent list. However, land and water continue to be in the state list. It's a question whether they should be there or whether they should be somewhere else. In water, we know that we have tremendous problems with interstate rivers, disputes between states. But apart from interstate rivers, a subject which is not in the state list, it's something the courts have gone into, and we've not been able to do a damn thing about it. I again believe that land and water should remain a state subject. Because without land and water, there's very little geographic meaning to a state. And therefore, I'll end at this point essentially to say that where you need the center is to keep movement going. It is to keep standards which are compatible nationwide. And you need possibly the idea of knowledge also flowing without barriers, which has problems when we've got so many languages, but it's something we are doing and we will have to do. And I think this whole center-state thing can be played up too much. Thank you.
Political economy, to that extent, I understand of the markets, particularly and commission agents. If you go to regulated markets in Maharashtra or Gujarat or other places, very often you will find the chairman of the AT&C market is the current MLA or past MLA or future MLA. Many of these commission agents actually are funding elections, local elections. And this is how it requires real guts for anybody, because then you are also cutting out the source of your election funding to do justice to the farmers. What is needed and perhaps could have been done? Abhijit talked about that marketing is being talked about at a concurrent list if we can do. Model X, just sending a letter and do this, do that. Nobody is listening. I think this government, when it came, they have about 21, 22 states. They could have gotten, you have a strong prime minister, if he has brought all the chief ministers within 6 months, I want this to be streamlined. Otherwise, the commissions and the taxes range so much. In Gujarat, cotton is transacted at 0.5% commission. But in other states, even Punjab, our great wheat and rice, the total taxes and commissions earlier used to be 14.5%. After GST, they came down to 6% and again went up to 8%. Yes, 7%. I mean, it's a rent-seeking exercise by the state government from the center, because you can't run the PDS system without me, therefore I will put on all these cess. The center, the way it led GST reforms, should call all the states, we want to rationalize this. Not more than 2% on this of any commodity across states. How much revenue you lose, we will compensate you. You know, this is where I think a golden opportunity of this government has been lost. Talking about creating a national market with ENAM and all that without doing the basic work of standardization, we are talking somewhere in different. But there are some informal standards. I was amazed to see in Kolar, it was good learning, that what goes to West Bengal and to Bangladesh, 17-ton truck was being packed, and commission agent's name and everything has to be given. So if this time he puts an upper layer in those boxes, good one, and next time that truck will not go there. So there is informal way in which it operates, but it's a high cost. You cannot look at the computer and bid for it unless your man is right there. From West Bengal, people were in Kolar to see which ones are. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the point is that we've got a system built on trust. And it is a system which works. Andhra Pradesh fish predominates over local fish in all of the northeast. Okay, and fish is about the most perishable of commodities. And people wouldn't be buying it if they didn't think it was reasonably better than the local fish. So things do work in terms of moving. Where it fails is in terms of getting a return to the farmer compatible with. As far as the political control is concerned, Ashok's example of the milk cooperatives is no different. Every damn chairman of a milk cooperative is either an ex-minister or, and certainly an ex-MLA. So again, you can have good and you can have bad. At the end of the thing, I think really it is the Sardar Patel which matters. That is, you need a movement from below which makes a precise demand for what they want. And that movement from below doesn't happen in India for the reason that farmers' organizations have not actually been that greater political force on anything. And one of the main reasons why it doesn't work in the market is because you have to take credit from the guys in the market. Now that's the level of organization, that's the level at which it becomes a political force or it doesn't. And without it being a political force, it's not going to have much impact. That's my simple answer to on the political side. So where it does, I don't know what exactly Digvijay did, but he obviously managed it. As far as those standards are concerned, it is trust. Again, the current system works because you know the guy at the other end, he knows you, and it is word to mouth. It will not work the moment it becomes anonymous. And that is where you really need standards, because the goods must carry the standard on it. And that's something we've got to do, and it's doable. In this age of technology, if we can't do that, we shouldn't be talking about most things. Okay.
Thank you. I don't think we have time for other questions. We will do another session. We have other sessions. Already I have a signal from the controller.
Only one, sir. Very brief.
Yeah.
Very brief.
Then I'll answer it.
Sir, sir, may you please give us as an organization any suggestion that how we should move as an organization, farmers organization, to get our productivity and sustainability? It's a very small question, sir. Sir, we need your suggestion as a farmer.
Okay, during the course of
sir,
this.
we are not getting MSP. Market is something different, as you have already said, and we are facing a lot of problems in agriculture.